Hi, everyone. Welcome to the SI Network event. Let's wait for a few minutes for everybody to join. Meanwhile, I'll share the Miro board link so that you can access it on your device. Right, so the link to the Miro board is in chat box. Awesome.
Yeah, good to see everyone here today. Welcome to the session, and I welcome you to turn on your video to make it more interactive, but we will be working on the mirror board, so definitely pick up on the link in the chat and please join there when you're ready.
All right, so we'll go ahead and start now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's SI Network event. Today's event is called Systems and Complexity Ideas for Researchers. It's hosted by SI Research Hub. Thank you so much for joining us today for this interesting workshop. This is the first time we're doing this one. Really looking forward to all the collaboration and interesting conversations happening here. Quick housekeeping notes. The workshop will go on for 60 minutes. And then it's going to be super interactive. So at some point, we will pick up sticky notes and type in our answers, things like that. So it's a good idea to be able to access the Miro board link on your device. And also the session is being recorded. We will upload this on YouTube and our web portal for future reference. It's a great resource for learning for the community. So the purpose for today's workshop is to give you an experience of integrating systems thinking ideas in research to take a holistic approach to research. Your host and facilitators today is Joss. He's joining us from London, and he's the founder of SI Network. He's been doing a lot of amazing work right now. Myself, Roma, I'm joining in from Bangalore, and I'm ecosystem builder at SI Network. We're really excited to host today's workshop. You could also look at some of the resources here we have, which we're using for today's workshop. One is the System Thinking Toolkit. We're using a lot of canvases from this toolkit. So in order to access, you could just click on this button here, and it'll take you right to the web portal. And then this is Complexity Principles for Food Systems, a case study, an example of how these principles could be applied in research. And lastly, we're also using our concept cards. So you could, again, click here and it will take you to the web portal. So that's about the resources. And today's event is quite straightforward. We'll start off with an introduction, and then Joss will talk about systems thinking principles, and then we will move on to workshop. In the end, we'll wrap up with your feedback and future directions with SI Network. And time for icebreaker. So we would like to know, what area are you doing research in? So you could click one of these sticky notes and then type in your answer. Maybe for next 1 minute, let's do that. Awesome. We see some really interesting themes here. We have somebody from mental health, psychometrics, and then nutrition, cancer and NCDs, organizational performance and innovation, value delivery and ITSM, social innovation, suicide prevention, health systems, and patient-oriented research. This is interesting. We'll have a lot of diverse conversation today in this session. So really looking forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us again. Over to you, Josh, for the next part.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roma. Pleased to see you all here today. We've just got a short hour, so I might jump in. What we're going to try and do is take these kind of core ideas from systems and complexity and try to illustrate how we go about applying them, and then a little exercise for you people to think through that. So lots of ways of approaching systems thinking and complexity. We break it out like this and try to help people shift their thinking from a partial view to a systems view. Is the first one. And the second one is thinking about shifting from a linear view to a more emergent, non-linear view. And the third one is shifting from a disconnected to a networked, relational perspective of the system. And the final one is looking at adaptation, trying to shift from a kind of fixed, planned view of the world and of change to one that's more about the system's dynamics and its evolution and adaptation. So these are kind of core dimensions to systems thinking we will be exploring today, and as we go through, trying to apply them. We're not so much about learning these sessions today, but more the question of how we really get them from the ideas into the practice of the work that you're doing, the research and so forth. And to do that, we'll be using these concept cards. So you can see 4 main sections here, which is really replicating the 4 main areas here. So up here, we'll be exploring, holism in this section up here. This will be all about emergence in the top right. Bottom right will be, all about networks and relational view. Bottom left is about adaptation and evolution. And then we have 5 concept cards in each that we use to kind of subcategories of that, sub-concepts of that really big concept that we'll be looking at. So I've taken our paper, our food systems paper, as you saw there, that's from our hub. We worked with the hub team to take these ideas, these principles, and apply them in the context of food systems change. So that's the kind of illustration we're going to be using. So how did we start there? Well, we want to start from the top in terms of, explain to people, not assuming that people know what, the systems and complexity stuff is. So we want to say a few words about that. The first cards here are kind of general ones, which are, okay, what is systems thinking? Shifting from these individual parts to this kind of systems view, should we say. The second one is about complexity and what is a complex system? What are the characteristics and so forth? What's the difference between simple and complex? And what is complexity theory? How does that help us understand complex systems? So this is kind of preliminary stuff, getting people aware of this different way, it's a new paradigm. So we're really trying to, at the beginning, help them become aware that there's a different way of looking at the world, right? There's a kind of analytical reductionist way, and now there's a systems way, this systems and complexity way. And laying that out for them so they become clear about it, and also helping them kind of see what it looks like in this context. So not going to go into each of those cards, the contents of them, but we can see here in the food systems paper, we started by explaining what is a complex system. It's a system that has many parts that are highly interconnected and interdependent, and it's dynamic as it's evolving over time with emergent functionality and dynamics. And we give examples of that right here, just to kind of ground it in people's thinking. Or at least complex challenges in this case. So these are examples fit in the food system. And then we kind of illustrate the characteristics of complex systems here. They're open, they're networked, they're dynamic, they're self-organizing, and so forth. And then laying out those 4 dimensions I showed before. This is the beginning of this paper where we're just doing that preliminary work by explaining, what systems and complexity is, what a complex system is, and how we can look at the food system as a complex system instead of a more normal kind of analytical reductionist approach. And then here we're just saying, okay, there's these 4 dimensions we talked about: the holism and self-organization, relational and adaptive perspective, and saying that's what we're going to cover in this paper, right? Those different views. Maybe I just pause for a second there. Does that all make sense to people so far? In this part, what you're really saying is that whatever you're studying here, food, health, energy, or I don't know, microbiology, you could say there's 2 ways of looking at this: the analytical reductionist and the holistic way, right? And just explaining what we mean by that systems thinking way, that complexity theory way, and maybe illustrating a little bit of what that looks like. So that's where we're starting. It's kind of laying the foundations. Any questions or comments on this one? Otherwise, I will move on. All good so far. Okay, you can put comments or questions in the chat. So we can then go into the first section, right? And yeah, all of what we're trying to do here is really change people's thinking about the system. And the first one is this holism, right? Trying to shift from a more analytical reductionist approach to this approach here, right? So this one explains that concept. Reductionism is kind of narrowing down to focus on specific parts. Holism is kind of broadening out to look at the system more generally and understand the interrelationships, how the parts fit into the whole, the broader context. And we have a few concepts here, kind of key concepts. And these aren't the only ones, right? There could be other ideas in here. We're just pulling out a few of them. So there's one about reflexivity, actually becoming aware that we as observers are, part of this whole process. The world is not just purely objectively transparent to our senses. We are actually shaping it through the paradigm we adopt and so forth, and being aware of that. Different perspectives are very important for understanding complex systems. We need to build it up from multi-dimensional perspective. Multi-dimensionality, complex systems exist on different levels and across different dimensions. And this idea of synthesis, that we're synthesizing up instead of reducing down and breaking apart. We're trying to think about what happens when we put things together, and that's synthetic holism. So those are some of the key concepts. They don't match exactly this paper here. They're pretty similar. We're still looking at holism here. So we've started the first principle. This is the context of healthcare. We see here, if we wish to develop health and sustainable food systems, we need to think holistically, considering all dimensions of the food system, When dealing with complexity, we should avoid narrowing down to specific solutions and aspects of the system. So hopefully you're seeing here, we're taking that big idea, we're applying it in this context here. Holism tries to understand things in the broader context, and thus we must look at different scales as well as different aspects of the system and look at the overall patterns created by this. In systems thinking, we aim to see both the trees and the forest. So hopefully you're seeing in that, how the idea is being applied. Of course, we have some of these concepts here. Synthesis is one I picked up on. Characteristics of synthesis is to look at the way the elements of a system combine to form the functioning entirety. And we give an example in food here. A well-functioning food system combines all elements that would be one where the most affordable and accessible food is also the one that works in terms of maintaining overall health and environment. So thinking about all the relevant factors involved there. Alignment are the other ones, intentionality and inclusivity. But maybe we skip forwards to having you people work on this idea. So this is one of the canvases from the toolkit we saw earlier. You heard that quote there. Systems thinking helps us see not just the trees, but also the forest. So the forest is the whole, right? And that's what we want to kind of show people. So let's start off with a little exercise here. In your context, you talked about many different areas that you're working in there. Tell us, what does it look like from a partial view? On the left here, we're going to take a few minutes, post up stickies, and then also from a more holistic perspective. You'll see the question there posted on the canvas. You can read through it if you're unclear about it. And of course, we want you to take your subject, so you can start thinking about how to apply this. And let's take maybe 4 minutes to do that, to get you thinking through this. If you have any questions, if you're struggling with Miro, you can use chat. Just let us know. So we're doing both here, as mentioned, relatively quick exercise. Don't forget to move to the second box, so to get an experience of that one also.
All right. Thank you so much for participating in this part. Would you like to talk about any of these? Anybody would like to share from your responses? Let me see. Sergio, is that right? Would you like to share a little bit about your answer here?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I think when we try to focus on just parts of the situation, this is a biased view, right? And when you don't try to see the full forest, you are seeing just a part of the problem. And when you or challenge, and when you try to go over of this challenge, in general, I think you will poorly address this challenge of problem because you are just seeing one part of the problem. That's my thought. Thank you.
Do you want to share what you put in the other box, Sergio, also? Or?
Yes, sure. I think it's around here.
Yep.
When we look at the whole forest, right? I think is a big problem, but I think often a big problem is a collection of small problematic situations, right? And when we focus on the biggest problem, we try to how to say this, we take a bite and more that we can chew, right? Because there is a whole lot of situations going on that complexity in that ecosystem that is very hard to address every small situation when we just look at the big picture. Thank you.
Right. That's interesting. And I can also see some specific examples here, like missing key population groups is equals to inequity, one size fits all strategies, maybe out of context. Does anybody want to share about some of these specific examples here? Like this one's interesting. Missing key population groups.
I was the one who wrote that one. I'm Pauline. So sometimes if we are not cognizant of all the populations that we serve, we miss and we don't collect data for them, or they're not included in the data collection populations that we have. You miss key insights, and that would lead to inequities when you design programs that exclude these people. And so it leads to the other post-it that I also wrote. A one size fits all approach doesn't necessarily work. You might need to do some market segmentation in how you understand and also how you deliver interventions. So systems thinking in the whole continuum of designing an intervention.
Right. And on the other side, holistic perspective.
So I wrote health has political, social, and commercial determinants. And then that whole sphere of things that sometimes researchers or implementers do not really have the power to influence. But so you have to be strategic in your stakeholder engagement, and then so that you address these determinants that affect how a program is implemented. Thank you.
Right. Joss, would you like to add something to this?
No, that's all good. Maybe just pick up on one more and then we'll move on. We haven't got too much time yet. Dan, did you want to share?
Sure. So my three of the top corner here, like they're taken to parts from the whole, hidden variables, things we're not considering, kind of the same pattern. I think I just talked about. There's premature convergence, and then we'll settle on what we think is an intervention or a bet or investment, thinking that we understand we don't. And so that's why I said the ultimate impact is we'll have the wrong investment in terms of attention or dollars, whatever it is. And that creates my experience at least creates a very negative strong negative feedback loop or maybe positive feedback loop because it creates path dependency and it makes the problem worse when we're just looking at the parts. Excuse me. For the whole, I said, obviously get deeper alignment of strategy and focus. Like people understand deeply what we're trying to do and how the system performs. I think it's critical to get connectivity and feedback loops, even the notion of feedback loops and how that will happen and what that looks like over time, which leads to transitional states, right? At least in my world, there's not everything needs to be gold plated, so to speak. You can treat time as a dimension once you understand the system behavior. And I just threw a counter sticky on there because I'm like, from experience, right, working in this, and it can feel messy and time consuming, right? When you're trying to sort of build in this kind of systems mindset. Those are my stickies.
Great. Thank you very much, Dan. Thanks to the others. I might move on. It's relatively quick exercise today. Hopefully you're getting a bit of insight there into this idea of, shifting from analytical to more holistic view, and that can be a really powerful insight in and of itself, So let's stay going here. The next one's looking at really the difference between linear and non-linear. We pretty quickly move towards a kind of cause and effect view of the world for many reasons. It's quite comforting in terms of giving us a sense of control and agency and predictability and all of this when complex systems don't really work like that. So we really need to encourage people to move to a more non-linear emergent kind of view of the world, often self-organizing, looking at self-organizing dynamics in the system. So that's the second one here. Let's take a quick look at some of the cards. So yeah, emergence is really the big idea in reductionism. If you see a system that's been designed and built upon reductionism, what you see is what looks like a lot of kind of organizations and systems around here, this hierarchical kind of structure where everything's kind of held in place like this. And we're saying emergence is more a bottom-up thing. It's more about how small parts come together across the system to form new patterns of organization as they emerge. So again, this is another big kind of powerful concept. We're quite used to looking at the world like this. This is kind of our default assumption is whenever there's order in the world, we think that must be designed in some way. And what this is saying is actually, no, patterns can emerge from the bottom up. Doesn't have to be, you don't have to impose order on that system to get it. And we see this, in systems like ants and flocks of birds, but also, traffic jams and people crossing the street and many other areas. The internet, for example, these are kind of self-organizing systems, but we're not accustomed to really looking in that way. So again, it can be another powerful kind of conceptual shift that moves us from reductionism to systems thinking here. And a couple of cards there. One is self-organization. How does this actually happen? How do these kind of parts, these random distributed parts actually interact and start to self-organize through feedback loops and, the emergence of tractors and so forth. And you can use that, imagine you could use this to describe the formation of markets or the formation of economy and so forth, or even the formation of a civilization, something as great as that. Or, in biology, a lot of processes actually in our body and in ecosystems are self-organizing processes. So it can be a really useful concept. There's a lot of kind of research around that also, this idea of moving away from direct causality to this non-linear kind of causality where things emerge out of a distributed network of interactions is again a powerful concept. We're normally looking for this way, but if we shift it to this, it can derive new insights. Transition processes, how small parts come together, reach critical mass, we get feedback loops and tipping points and so forth, and integrated levels, how things self-organize, form patterns of organization, new patterns of organization ultimately form on top of those as they come together. You go from atoms to molecules and cells and tissues and bodies and so forth. And those are all some of the concepts we put in here. And just look at this in the context of the food systems paper. Emergence is a term used in philosophy and arts and science to describe how, properties or features are created as we put things together. Emergence in food system describes a process where components part interact to form synergies. These synergies then add value to create a combined organization, which gives rise to the emergence of macro structures. And yeah, we think about that in kind of regional food systems or even national food systems, how different parts are coming together and sometimes forming synergies and new patterns of organization in that system and supply chains and so forth. So here's the concept of synergies. We give an example. Promoting voluntary and collective grassroots initiatives where actors interested in food issues come together, carry out a diagnostic of the areas and seek and implement food solutions in a comprehensive way. Territorial food projects. So these can be, like food box schemes and it's trying to move away from the idea that we have to distribute everything through centralized kind of supermarkets and so forth. But kind of that should be peer-to-peer systems where we're transacting locally as a way to create and exchange food. This is it also here. The creation of urban agricultural food markets lets individual vendors supply the city with their own food. This allows the power of supply and demand, consumer preference, and price elasticity to govern the interactions and promote self-organizing results in the emergence of a governing market system rooted in local context. So it's saying that in this food system, yes, we have this kind of top-down model of, the corporates and supermarkets and so forth in a centralized way coordinating that system. It's also possible to get it in a bottom-up way through these peer interactions, like box schemes, where we're buying directly from the farmer and so forth. So those are some examples. Might stay going for now. I think you are understanding the idea, and we'll try and put it into practice here. So this is the one we're going to work on, trying to move away from this direct causality, which is very prominent in research of all kinds, to this emergent way, looking at the network of factors that are creating the system's dynamics out of which the issue is emerging. Hopefully you're grasping this concept, and now we're going to try and put it into practice here. We have another little canvas view on the left. We're going to encourage you to take whatever area of research you're working on and think about how do we describe the phenomenon that through these kind of linear cause and effect reactions, what does that look like? And then on the right, we're going to go to trying to describe it in this more bottom-up, emergent, self-organizing way where patterns are emerging out of a distributed set of interactions. Okay, guys, that's it. Let's take 4 minutes. Yep, and we'll come back again to discuss. Any questions? Post them in the chat, please.
great. Thank you once again for your participation here. Does anybody want to share anything that you've written here? You can unmute, or we could take a look at one of these here. For instance, malnutrition is a result of poor food choices, largely behavioral. And then someone writes, student learning outcomes being driven only by quality of instruction or students' motivation. Does anybody want to talk about this? For instance, I have written prescribed pathways, which is very organized and linear. We refer to a lot of very, very, very old research material without knowing how it's been developing currently. So we could actually start looking at what's more current and be forward looking and be okay with unorganized research methods. Okay.
Maybe.
Ma?
Yeah.
Hi, Jules.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, somehow in the teaching learning environment, it's always considered, okay, the teacher didn't teach well, that's why the student didn't learn well, or the students were distracted, or they are just not bothered to study. I mean, we just put it too simply out there, saying either of them are the only people who are at fault if they are not learning. So that's how we are looking at learning challenges in any whether it's school or higher ed. So that's how we are looking at.
How did you what did you put in the other box?
Yeah, and we need to, teachers are mostly just being postmen actually, in a way that there is a board which decides the curricula, there is somebody else who's giving the outcomes to them, and they just go and just deliver it out there, instead of teachers realizing what is the student's capability. They know the students the best, and when teachers designs the curriculum, knowing what students learn best and how to take that learning best into the classrooms, and when the parent is more engaged with what is happening in the classroom, it creates a three-way street when students start taking ownership for their own learning outcomes.
Yeah.
In that way. So that's a beautiful where there is like a synergy emerging out of the teacher, the student, and the parent coming together in the institution. So
Yeah, we don't really think of education or learning as an emergent phenomena, do we? We think of it as like we've got to give these children this content, and it doesn't really lead to them having learned something. Like maybe they consume it, but they don't really learn it. Whereas learning is maybe these things need, a number of different things need to come together in some way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, if I could just add something to that really quickly, because that really really hit home. I'm back in college trying to finish my degree, and I'm going through some of this, reliving some things from high school where it's just like things are so inefficient. But the feedback control, so many of these things come to an absence of real feedback. Or when we get feedback, we just check a box. But just like she was saying, and if you had real time feedback from the students, which are the real customers in the education system, we could learn so much, like in so many other systems. But I mean, very often most of the information is confusing or unnecessary or just noise. But if somebody would hear that information, everybody could save so much time. Like, oh well, let's just cut this out if reading the book doesn't actually help. So anyways, I just really wanted to applaud what she just said. Those are great points. Thank you.
Thank you. Roma, do you want to pick up on maybe one more before we move on?
Sure, yeah. Would you like to talk about programs, policies, and practice without taking into consideration account those with, yeah. I can't quite pronounce his name.
Absboru?
All right.
Maybe Adrian, is there anything here you'd like to share?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, yep.
Sorry, yeah, because it's an organization account that I log into for this. But yeah, like thinking more that linear thinking, that top-down approach, right? Where it's people at the higher levels that don't have that experience, that are developing the program's policies and practices for individuals, not taking into account their context. And without that, it leads to those poor outcomes and those patient experiences. So when you go to that emergence perspective, it's looking at the learning and the collaboration, taking into account those lived and living experiences and people meeting each other where they're at. So rather than that siloing in or like people being in these pockets throughout the system, it's creating those connections and those bridges so that together better systems, better programs, policies, practices can be co-developed to just improve experiences, not just for patients, but for providers and system leaders as well.
Yeah, we'll move on now, but you know, the question of context, if we go back to learning, like we really learn things when they're in context, don't they? Like we're in work and we need to achieve this or do that, and we really need to learn this thing, and then we have a great desire and ambition for that or a great interest for it. But we often decontextualize it, and it's just like we give students this content and they should just receive it. So this context thing is actually very, very important in multiple different ways, but thanks for highlighting that. I think those were good examples. Let's stay going. We've just got 15 minutes or so. So here we are. We're going to talk about this relational paradigm. We know that's called system thinking, and when you start looking at the world in terms of relationships, you ultimately get to networks of relationships. And let's see here, we have our cards. This is relational thinking. So we're trying to shift away from the compartmentalized disconnected view to this interconnected relational view. And it's a way of seeing the world that places greater precedence on relationships or connections, or equal precedence on those, the elements in the part in the system. It's then trying to look not just at individual relationships or one or two, but also what emerges as a network when you have all these relationships across the system, and how does that network actually shape the parts in the system, your place in that network, how the structure of that network, is it centralized or decentralized, are you on the edges or the center? Is it, some people have lots of connections and some have few, all these things. We can use that network view to understand any complex system or any system, as opposed to this kind of compartmentalized view. So as we're talking about here, it also includes interdependency, of course. That's a relational dynamic, that, you know, it's not just that one thing affects another, but of course that feeds back to affect the first. And in that dynamic, we are interdependent. It's to do with synergies, right? These relationships are not neutral. They can be positive synergies or negative synergies, and we know that can add also, you know, the whole can be greater or less than the sum of the parts based upon those positive or negative synergies. It's a lot to do with networks, and the aspects of networks, how things flow across them, as they talked about, kind of degree distribution and so forth, and the structure of those, right? Are they centralized or decentralized? How does that affect you, and you know, how resources flow through that system and how the whole thing actually works? So there's some great ideas from network science here that we can easily apply to, you know, the understanding of any complex system, because they are ultimately their structure is this network structure, and it can derive great insight. And network science and perspective is still quite new in many areas. So there's a few cards here. Maybe I won't go too much into them, because we want to move forwards. Relational thinking is a way of seeing the world. Yep. Because of the interconnected nature of complex systems, we need approaches that will enable us to better understand connections. Relational paradigm that will help us take a networked approach to thinking about organizing and managing food systems in a more decentralized way. Example, Previously, we developed only previously depended only on supermarkets and large distributions to aggregate food supplies. But now with digital connectivity, we have the possibility to connect producers and consumers in a variety of ways to facilitate supply and achieve scale, interdependencies. Let's stay going to hear a little bit about your thoughts on this one. The questions are here, and let's just jump in. I think you're getting this idea. It's quite again, these are all big, powerful ideas. I think it's kind of well laid out here for you to take and really think about what this means in the context of the areas that you're researching on. So again, we'll take 4 minutes. I encourage you to engage in the activity to get the most from this. Start with this connected and then move to the relational perspective.
All right. Great. So could we have somebody explain what you've written? Maybe Adrian, would you like to speak a little bit about this one? In academia, hierarchies appear in levels of.
So what I wrote there is that in academia, what I noticed with research is that, they'll say you can't contact this person, they're with an R1, they're with an Ivy League, you're an undergrad, you're just a master's student. Even at the conferences, don't present that because you're not a graduate student, even though we want to know the information. It just goes against basically the hierarchy that's there. And that really cuts off information flows and knowledge that would benefit the community. Also with disciplinary boundaries, that different disciplines, they have different tools, they have different knowledge. Maybe some are more qualitative like anthropology, some are more quantitative like experimental psychology, but they can really benefit, especially when you're dealing with very complex phenomena and you're using a mixed methods approach. You can benefit from multiple perspectives in order to get a rich understanding of that. So I found that I actually had to go beyond that and kind of push for expanding the research team in directions that they weren't necessarily used to. There was a bit of pushback, but I said, we really want to understand this phenomena. So we need to pull in people from other universities, pull in people from disciplines where, maybe they don't have the easiest relationship because some qualitative methods are a bit softer. But I said if we combine that with quantitative to increase the rigor as we move on, we really need that contextual understanding. We can't go without it. So
yeah, it's like interdisciplinary, way of doing research instead of the normal siloed way, isn't it? And I think that speaks well to, this different paradigms that we're very used in academia to our silos, and we see now emerging more and more kind of the idea of interdisciplinarity and the value of that, particularly in the context of trying to understand complex systems. Yeah, maybe one other quick or one other. Well, maybe we should move on actually for the sake of time. Thank you a lot for that, Adrian. Hopefully others got benefit from that exercise and you're understanding this idea. And the final one we're going to look at is about an adaptive, dynamic way of looking at the world instead of a fixed, planned one. And we have a few ideas here. So this is kind of core to it. The reductionist paradigm actually leads us back to a view of the world that's actually quite static. It's about structure, it's about equilibriums. And when we apply that to acting in the world, it leads to this kind of planned view of the world, that we can manage change, that it can be step by step and so forth. When the way complex adaptive systems really work is this very dynamic nature to them. They're constantly acting and reacting, the agents in the system, they're adapting, they're evolving over time. And the best way to really engage with that system is through this kind of iterative learning and trying to grow new things, and constantly adapt to the changes within the system. And that's a different kind of paradigm, a different view to the way systems change. One is more this static that we can plan and control and predict change, and the other is this evolving dynamic network of interacting agents that are acting, reacting, and we're getting evolutionary dynamics of change here. So it's a few different cards there explaining evolution as a really important concept, and we understand quite well the dynamic. It plays out in all kinds of complex adaptive systems, economies, political systems, so on and so forth. This concept of resilience and anti-fragility. Going to quickly jump into some questions now because we're short on time. You can read this in the context of the cards and so forth. You'll be very much welcome to come back and visit this board afterwards too. But you can see here some questions just to get you thinking about this one. And of course, there's a graphic here that kind of lays out some of those also. So let's just take maybe 3 minutes to jump into this exercise and have a think about these two different paradigms in the context of, what you're interested in researching.
Perfect, thank you. Tahira, would you like to talk about the flexible, iterative, and learning-based approach that treats development as emergent, evolving, and uncertain? Anybody else want to explain practical decision making despite uncertainties? Anybody?
I also heard that, and I think in public health or whichever sector, there are lots of uncertainties that we face, but we don't have to be paralyzed by analysis. So we need to be able to be agile and to be able to create these frameworks that let us decide even in the face of uncertainty.
Right, and on the other side, on the other box?
Yeah, I think she was kind of covering both there, Roma. Anyone else want to add?
Hi, I was mute when I was talking. Is that still, can I explain that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so oh, you are in the static visit is a project management aspect. I put that example. So when we are rigid, like achieving the target or achieving the goal, and we have to follow the rigid system we are under the municipal government. It's often after a few years we realize that could be done differently while we are in flexible and agile project management process if you would follow. So that's why I put that one, the predictable, and this 2 point is so interconnected, and we are doing that system and try to move from rigid planning to the flexible planning. So
yeah,
that's
excellent. And it's so important, isn't it, in the context of kind of working in complex systems that we do make that transition. I think top-down planning can work sometimes well when building bridges and so forth, but it can lead us far astray when in some scenarios when we're dealing with very complex adaptive systems, we do need to think about this kind of initiative growing and the evolution of the system and so forth. So yeah, let's draw to a close because our time is up. Hopefully, maybe I'll just do a very brief recap. Hopefully you got value from today's session in terms of exploring these kind of core concepts of systems and complexity and thinking through how you might apply them in your work and how kind of powerful they can be. They can really help us shift the paradigm, you know, and I think everyone here would agree we need to do some of that work to really help us see better the complex systems we're dealing with and really work with them in a much better way, embracing that complexity. So going to leave it there. You have the resource at the beginning. You have this mirror board. I'll let Roma kind of bring us to a close. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much, Joss, and thank you everybody for your participation today. If you're not part of SI Research Hub already, you can click on the button here and join us there. We have some really interesting conversation going on there. And also follow us on LinkedIn. We share a lot of resources and event updates there. And like to know your experience from today's session. You could pick one of these dots and place it on the horizontal line between 0 and 10. 10 I found very useful, and 0 it was not useful. And please feel free to share your comments and feedbacks or any key takeaway, any recommendations. Thank you so much again for joining us today. You have a great rest of the day.
Excellent. Thank you, Roma. Thank you, guys. I'll see you guys soon. Okay.